Hey folks, Ryan here from Mr. Gaming Rants and Reviews, and I've got a good old review for you today where I'm going to be taking a look at a little game called Gadget Grid, designed by Matt Hewes, illustrated by Patrick Liddel, and published by Space Mole Games. Space Mole Games did provide me this as a review copy for their current Kickstarter that is now live as of July 12th, 2022. So be sure to go check out their Kickstarter campaign here. We've got 1 to 8. Yes, I'm counting out 1 to 8 potential alien races that are coming in to compete in the galaxy's most famous game show, Gadget Grid. Oh boy, you're gonna have to be lucky, cunning, strategic, lucky in order to survive and return to your home planet with fortune and fame and not being left out in the dust. So join me at the table. I'm going to show you how to play Gadget Grid, and then I'm going to give you my final thoughts towards the end of this video. What am I thinking about Gadget Grid? Should you be backing Gadget Grid and all of that lovely jazz? So join me at the table. I'm going to show you how to play Gadget Grid by Space Mole Games. Well, all right, let's learn how to play Gadget Grid. So before we get going here, we're going to have to do a little bit of setup. So depending on your player count, you're going to need to turn to the rule book, and you're going to have to refer to how many players are going to actually be playing this game. So here's a nice little grid here to kind of determine your starting setup deck. And what you're going to want to really pay attention to is the number of players. I'm going to set us up for a 4-player game here. So in a 4-player game, I'm going to need 8 setup cards, 6 Zombot cards, 4 gadget cards, and of course our 4 character cards that we're going to actually be playing with. So I've got those all kind of set up right here. Here's our 4 character cards that are going to get shuffled into the startup deck. Here are the 6 Zombot cards. I'm going to now need 8 of these setup cards, and I've already got them previously shuffled. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we're also going to need, it says here, 4 gadget cards. And the gadget cards are going to be these cards that are in one of these 2 decks that are in these kind of neat little card holders here that you got to put together. Really quite nice. So we're going to need 4 of those. So maybe I'll draw 2 of these ones. And I'll draw 2 of these ones here. And we're going to take all of these cards here. We're going to flip them all upside down. We're going to remove the rest of those ones. And this is going to be my starting deck. And I'm just going to give this a nice little shuffle to hand up. And then we're going to seed the board. And this is kind of really important piece because this is going to be an action that you're going to be doing actually quite a bit throughout this game, is actually placing cards out onto this, out into the arena grid here. I'm going to remove the rule book here just for the time being. And you can see here that the grid is divided into, well, from 00 all the way up to 99. And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up rolling these 2 10-sided die together in order to determine the placements. So here we go. Okay, I think I got the shuffling all kind of good here. So there we go. So I'm going to draw 2 cards here to start off with. I'm going to take my 2-sided die and I'm going to roll them. And the first one here is I get a 1 on the green die and a 5 on the white die here. So there we go. So this means that I'm going to seed the first 2 cards on 15 and on 51. So if I find 15 here, they don't specify which order you're actually supposed to put them in here. You kind of just randomly choose here. I always seem to put the lower number first and then the higher number. That's just kind of me. I don't think it actually specifically says which way you're going to. But I'll put the first one on 15 here. And then the other one is on 51. Now, to help you out with where 51 is, it's actually a really quite neat, clever graphical design here, is that you can actually follow this laser path, and there is 51. 51 should be the opposite side of 15 along this lasered path. So there's 51, and I'll put a card right there. Now, this card here, that's one of our Zombots, so you can actually just go ahead and take one of your Zombot standees and just replace the card with that one. That's just going to say that there's a Zombot in that thing. And then we're going to do this for the rest of the setup cards here. I'm going to roll this. Now it says 20. No, this one we get 22. Now we're going to also draw. We're going to be putting 2 cards there. So what do you do when it's just the number 22? Because 22 backwards is also just 22. So every space on this board can hold any number of items and characters and whatnots and everything. The only thing that there can be one of in a certain space is an environment. So I'm hoping that that kind of comes up here. So let's see. The first card here is oh, there we go. The first card here is a portal, and the portal does have the environment keyword on it. So now the other card is actually supposed to also go on 22 as well, but that's an environment, and cards cannot, and items and characters cannot go onto environments. In this case, this one is a portal. So this one is this one ends up being a widget card. So instead of placing this on top of that one, we're going to actually have to put it onto one of the 4 adjacent spaces. Now, for me, again, this is not very clear. They just say it's kind of up to the players. I always start with the lowest number, and then I kind of work my way around. If I can't put it, I always put it on the lowest number first, and then see if there's anything else on there. And again, that's just a me thing. That's not actually specifically written in the rule book. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling here. An 8 and a 0, so we're going to put one on number 8 and one on 80, which is down here. And I'm just gonna keep on doing this until our board is populated. Okay, so all the setup is done here. We can see a few things have happened. We've got a couple characters and zombots that are sharing the same space, which obviously can actually happen when you're setting up the board. So let's go ahead and start running through our actions, starting with the first player. And of course, actually, it's pretty zany here in the rule book here, where it says the first player is whoever was most recently beamed into an alien battle arena. I really hope that has actually happened to anybody out there, but you know what? I can't say for sure. So randomly determine yourselves a first player. Give them their little character cards here, because on these little character cards they do outline very nicely what the turn order and what you do on your turns every time that comes around to you. Now before we even do that here, first we got to do some checking. We got to check to see if there's any zombots within 2 squares of our characters, because for every zombot that is within 2 squares of our characters here, they get to draw some gadget cards to kind of help them out with their just kind of help them out a little bit. And it's important to know that zombots can only move a maximum of 2 spaces per turn. And they can't travel diagonally. They can only go orthogonally when they actually move. So we have to actually take that into consideration here. So let's take a look at good old Myron here over here. I'm just gonna kind of slide this out here. Okay, let's take a look at Myron. He's got a zombot here, and he's also got a zombot here. This zombot is not within 2 spaces because it cannot travel. The most that it can actually travel is like 1, 2, or 1, 2. So it's not actually going to reach him this turn. So there's only 2 zombots that are actually in range. Well, actually, this one's actually not even in range here, because it's actually blocked by this environment. It actually has to go around. So actually, Myron only has just the 1 zombot. So he's going to get to draw 1 gadget card. And so he draws an attack card, which actually you can go with him. Okay, let's take a look at here. Let's take a look at Pseudo. Pseudo, he's got 1 zombot. And again, this other zombot here, it's blocked by the terrain. It can't actually get to him just yet. So there's only 1 there in range. So he's going to draw he's also going to draw a card. He drew an environment card. You can't actually use these ones. These ones just end up getting discarded, and you can just keep drawing a new one. He also gets an attack card. Let's take a look at Zaggy here. Zaggy also has the same zombot, so she's going to actually draw there. They get a equipment card. And then we've got Grey Goo here. And Grey Goo also has this one Zombot that is in range of him as well, within 2 squares. So he's going to draw a card. He also gets an attack card. Okay, so that's the rest of the setup. Now we can actually go through our actual turns. And our turns are actually fairly straightforward and laid out very nicely on these turn order cards. The very first thing that you do on your turn is that you actually have to do the generate phase. And the generate phase means we're going to seed the board with more stuff. You simply take the 2 dice, roll them up, and we've got 34 and 43. So, okay, that's where these 2 Zombots are. So more things are going to happen. What we generally do, you get an option on your turn. You can either draw 2 from the same deck, or you can draw 1 from each. We generally like to do 1 from each. So let's say, okay, 34, it's going to be an environment card. Now there's already something there, so I'm just actually going to put it onto the next available environment, which will be right there. And then also we're going to go right here, and that is going to be an attack card, and a Zombot can be on that space. Zombots don't actually collect anything, so there's that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then it says we can do our action phase, and there's 3 things to do on your action phase. So actually technically 4. You can play a widget card, and it's highlighted in blue there because widget cards are actually blue gadget cards. Now, Myron here, he does not have a blue widget card, so we can't play one. Next thing you can do is you can buy a DLC, and that's in yellow, and that's these 4 cards over here. DLCs are actually pretty cool equipment that you can get. You're not going to get them very early on, but possibly later on. And they have a bunch of things going on here, but in order to purchase a DLC, you have to have the certain equipment here in order to actually buy it. So this one says you need a remote control, which is a red attack card, any green equipment card, and any blue widget. If you have those 3 things, you can buy this DLC. Now there's ways that you can make this cheaper and more easier to access, but you have to start taking some damage in order for that to happen. So obviously right now with only our 1 attack red card, it is not a remote control. We're not able to actually purchase any of these DLC cards. So what's the next thing I can do? It says, I can place 2 more things onto, I can place 2 more cards. Or I can just do nothing and move on to the movement phase. So Myron here says, let's feel a little bit adventurous. Let's put a couple more things onto the board here. So we roll the 2 dice, 12 and 21. So 12 is right over there. And 21 is going to be right here. Okay. Now, the next thing is later we're going to do our movement phase where it says we can move 3 spaces and diagonal movement is allowed. Okay, let's see what we can come up with here. So maybe Myron here. Let's do a little bit of portal movement because I kind of like the idea of that. So he's actually going to go this. He's going to go 1, and then use a portal to jump over here, 2, and then 3, and he's going to collect these 2 cards right here. So now he's collected the Mirror Universe widget and a non-Ogon attack card. Now, attack cards technically are actually hidden in your hand so that other players cannot see what you actually have. And so are widgets. Actually, all 3 of these cards are actually hidden information, but I'm just kind of laying them out here just for the sakes. These equipment cards can be played down right away, and they're kind of like an always ongoing effect. Now, the last thing that somebody gets to do on their turn says play an attack card or move a Zom 2 spaces. Diagonal Zom movement is not allowed. Now, there's 2 different types of Zoms. We only have 1 type out right now, and those are the Zom bots that were seeded at the beginning of the game. You can move one of those 2 spaces, or you can also play one of your red attack cards. Now, just noticing right now here, part of my setup is I forgot to put down or put onto our characters these lovely life gizmo tokens. And they're kind of like, they're really, really neat. They're really tiny. But they do have the little notch here that kind of slots into the top of these standees to kind of show how much life each of these particular characters has. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so Myron's got a couple choices here. You can either play one of his attack cards. Now he's got 2 attack cards here, and attack cards kind of do a couple different things. Like this one says, damage 1 person that's in a square with a 9. So a 9 would be any of these ones along the bottom edge of the board, and yeah, no, there's no one in those spaces, so that's actually not a one. We can damage all characters within 2 squares of us. And unfortunately, there's no one really within 2 squares of us. So, you know what? Maybe we're just going to maybe not play an attack card, but maybe we can move a Zombot. And that would actually be really quite handy for us because we can actually hit 2 people at the same time here. Because I can see that this lovely Zombot over here is just 1 square away from those 2 characters. So in this case, Myron's going to take control of the Zombot, and he's going to move them 1 space to these people. There we go. And that Zombot is going to damage each of those characters, taking 1 hit and 1 hit. Now, after taking those hits, though, Zaggy, they get to keep their life token. And also, who's that? Pseudo also gets to keep their life token because life tokens can now act as currency for purchasing the DLC cards. You can ignore, so 1 life token here can ignore 1 of the cost that says any. 2 life tokens can substitute a actual named card. So in the case of this card here where it says you need the wingsuit, any equipment, any attack, 1 life token can replace the any equipment or any attack. If you have 2 of them, you can actually replace both of them. Or this one that's actually named as wingsuit, I can spend 2 life tokens to actually replace that cost as well. So taking damage is actually going to get you a little bit more powerful because on your action phase, you would actually be able to purchase that DLC. All right, and then that's Myron's turn, and then now it's going to go over to the next player, which in this case is Pseudo, and they're going to run through those exact same, grab Pseudo here. He's now going to go through all of their phases in the exact same manner. Now, that's a couple important things to note here about some of the type of cards and some of the interactions that you're going to actually encounter. Like I said here, I was not actually able to damage anybody with my... But let's just say if I was, they do have the nice pattern. So in this case, let's take a look at the Rye of the Beholder here. It actually has this little green pattern here, kind of highlighting you. You are in the center, and then all of those squares would be where this actually attacks, which is really quite handy. Little reference for when you're doing these attacks. Along the edge of the board here, you can see that there are these things called sentinels. And those are these black and yellow striped environments that are seated on the board here. And they get activated if you end up with, like Grey Goo here, he's got a remote control attack card and it says activate any sentry. Sorry, sentries are what they're called, not sentinels, but sentries. And sentries have their own patterns on how to end up attacking. We got the Quetzalcoatl Cannonal. They attack on diagonals. The Mecha Kraken, they damage everybody within 2 squares, and there's the little pattern. We've got the Gorgonzilla, damages folks in a straight line. And then Acid Fountain damages everybody within a 5x5 grid except for the 4 adjacent slots on them. It's also important to note too that there are certain environment types that are highlighted along this edge of the board here. So it says here, no gadget cards can be placed on any environment. Place cards adjacent to, so that's just a reminder. Telling you how portals work. There's certain environments that are called the 4D printer, and that shows you how that works. Rubble, there's a couple rubble spaces already out here that we can see how those interact. And then we do have a floor malfunction, and we can actually see how that is going to work right here. And just read the text, and it explains exactly what's going on here. Okay, so now these players are going to go following this turn order over and over and over again. Okay, doing the generate phase, then the action phase, then movement, and then finally either attacking by playing an attack card or moving a Zom. Now notice it says a Zom, not a Zom bot, because there's another form of Zom in this game, and that is the Zomboids. Now what is a Zomboid? Well, as soon as a character loses all of their hit points, let's just say this folks, Pseudo, ended up losing all of their life points. Pseudo here is not eliminated from the game. Instead, he can flip his turn order card over here to be a Zomboid, and Zomboids have their own little their own little turn order. So you are not eliminated from the game necessarily. So they also have a generate phase, placing cards onto the grid here. An action phase, they can generate more cards or buy a DLC, or they can do nothing. In a movement phase, they can move 3 spaces, and they cannot move diagonal. They are now a Zom. And then they don't actually get to attack. But if they do end up going through spaces with people that have life tokens, they get to actually steal those life tokens and come back. And then they begin, once they have a life token, then they can finally turn this back over, and then they can actually finish out their turn as a living player. Okay, so that's kind of, now when you are in a Zom form though, like a Zomboid here, if they were still a Zomboid, other players around the table, if it's their turn, let's just say it's Grey Goose turn here, if they decide, you know what, they're not going to play an attack card, they're going to move a Zom, well, since you are now a Zomboid, they can actually move this character around the board, and possibly also give them life tokens if they end up attacking another actual player. And then therefore that person would become living again, and then they can turn over their turn order card. And I think that is essentially all of the things that are going on inside of Gadget Grid. We're going to continue taking turn after turn after turn, and this board is going to get very busy and full of things going on here. Some players are going to be Zoms, some players are not. They're going to be stealing their life points, but it's going to be finally the person that has only one, there we go, that's what I'm trying to say. Only one person with life tokens left is going to be declared the winner of Gadget Grid and get beamed back to their home planet and celebrate their successes from surviving this really wild and zany ride of a game show, I guess is what they're kind of competing in. All right, well, join me back at the studio, and I'm going to give you my thoughts about what I think about Gadget Grid. All right, that was Gadget Grid, Space Mole Games, Matt Hewes, Patrick Liddel. All right, so this game is currently on Kickstarter as of July 12th, 2022. So let's take a look at the components. Now, the components here right now, everything has been sent to me from Print and Play as a prototype. So from what I understand, most of the art is kind of in its final stages. Many of the components possibly could change from what you saw in my video here. So put that as a note here. But let's comment on the artwork here, because I think that it is very charming, very refreshing, kind of that very, I don't know, how do you put it, that kind of like that retro, like late 80s, early 90s science fiction twist on some of these characters here. Like we've got, oh my gosh, like we've got this guy right here. I'm trying to see if we can focus it in. Like, man, like he looks really, really quite cool. We've got the we've got the robots, the zombots. Where is it going here? There we go. We got the zombots, and they are going with the standees, which is a thing that I am very much enjoying inside of games here. Yes, you could have miniatures in this style of gameway, but that is just going to get in the way of everything that you're supposed to be doing. This has got a very, how would I put it, like that Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley feel type of game that we're going to kind of like going back to like those style of games with the nice standees, the good quality card art, the gigantic big grid board, 100 square grid board that you're going to be moving around and placing things onto. The artwork I am very much enjoying. I like the graphical design thing where they had the lasers going across to kind of depict, the opposites, the pairs for the dice, like the 84 and the 48. They're on the same diagonal line. You can easily find them. That was actually a really quite clever graphical twist for it. And then also being referred to as things as being opposites, you can easily find out where are they located on those diagonals. Let's get right into the gameplay and what am I thinking about this one. So right off the bat, you're going to notice that the variable setup in this game is something that we need to note, because you're going to get your little starting deck of 22 cards. Depending on what your player count is, you're going to have some different numbers of the startups, the zombots, obviously the players, and then how many other cards you're going to seed into that deck. But you're going to start off with those 22 cards, and you're just going to roll those dice and figure out where they're going to get placed. So they could be some games, they could be all over the map. And some games, everything could be really, really quite close together, kind of like the little how-to play video that I had going on today. There is such... and then some game setups might have lots of portals for you to jump through. Some may not have any portals at all at the very beginning, which kind of sucks, but, limits the movement. But hey, that's just the way that this game is going to play out. So the setup is going to determine the gameplay every single time. And there are like literally millions of different ways that these things can how this game can get set up. So that is an important note that we need to make, that every game is going to feel a little bit different based on the setup. On that note too, some games can go by very, very quickly depending on that setup, because if everybody is kind of in close proximity with one another, the combat is going to come fast and frequent, unless if you're able to get out of there. Because if players are allowed to use the zombots, which is kind of an interesting little twist there, instead of playing an attack card, you can get swarmed by those zombots fast, and you know what? In three rounds, your 3 life points, they're gone, and now you're a zomboid. Or even in a 2, if you're playing this 2-player, which I don't think I would recommend this at 2-player, you're just gone, which is just like not a fun feeling at all. So just beware that some games could be like you're turning into a zomboid quite quickly if everybody's all kind of congregated very, very closely and you're close to those zombots right at the very beginning. But on that note, there is no player elimination in this game. Even though you ran out of life points, you are still in this game. There are still things you can do when it comes around to your turn. And I think that is very important in this style of game, because you are not necessarily out of it. You can still try to steal some life points away from other players, and other players can actually use you as a pawn to try to go eliminate somebody else or reduce other people's health. That was very, very cool. let's take a look at all of the items and the cards that you can play in this game, because there are a schwack load of attack cards, like I mentioned, that you can play at the end of your turn in order to do some damage to people. There are these things called widgets, which are just kind of like, an action type of card. They're going to give you some extra movement on a turn, or you can like lots of different little things that you can do. There are these equipments that just give you a little bit of an extra boost into your gameplay abilities round to round. And then there are the DLC cards, which I might add, it is kind of like they seem like they should be a real central focus to the game, but we find that it's very, very hard to get at them. Essentially because they have such strict requirements to them that you do end up having probably need some of your life points in order to purchase them, that's not going to be until later in the game. Essentially, the game is almost winding down at that point by the time somebody actually gets to buy a DLC, which that maybe that's just the way that we've been playing this game lately, but we found that not many of those DLCs get purchased or at all by the time the gameplay is wrapping up, and maybe you get a round, maybe two, in order to use them. Oh wait, but even some of them also have cards that you have to play, like you have to have a remote control to activate, like say, like their type of abilities, and you just might not have a remote control. So take that as the DLCs are really, really quite cool. I just wish that I was able to kind of, purchase them faster and get them quicker so that I can use them a little bit more throughout the game, because they are actually really quite cool abilities that would just get, maybe if it was even a fact that, every character started with a DLC, kind of giving everybody a little bit of like a starting asymmetry to their characters, because that's kind of like one of my little knocks against the character. The characters are really, really quite cool, and they have these amazing backstories that are highlighted in the back of the instruction manual, but then none of them actually really do anything unique in the game. So maybe if they actually just started with DLC cards in play with them, that would give them, and then maybe that was just like their starting power, and and maybe you can upgrade. I don't know. I'm just spitballing an idea right now, just because I want to actually use those DLC cards more in the game. What else am I saying here? My son loves this game. It's easy enough for him to grasp. The turn structures are not overly complicated. There is a lot of text on these turn, or I'm just going to kind of show it up here. There's a lot of text on these turn order, but you know what? If you start doing the same things over and over again, you kind of internalize what you're supposed to be able to do. Like, hey, seed the board with 2 cards. Then you can either do this, or this. Then it's moving, then it's attacking. Like, that's essentially your turns in a nutshell. Let's talk about a couple of the little nuance things that are going on here, like using portals. This is a really, really neat, and just using the environment cards in general. There's a lot of different types of environment cards, and one of them is the portals, which I thought was really, really quite neat, that you can jump through portals, but actually also your attacks. If there are these ranged attacks or anything that kind of extends away from you, and you're next to a portal, you can actually use that portal to extend the attack through that particular portal. So you're actually, if you think that you're safe because I'm not anywhere near Ryan, but Ryan's near a portal, he can actually extend his attack through that portal. I thought that was actually a really neat idea. Really, really neat mechanically, very thematic, that I can just throw that rock through a portal and be able to hit somebody, or throw my axe through the portal and hit somebody. Really, really quite neat. The sentries that are on the board, there's quite oftentimes you're going to see quite a few of them, because quite a few of them are in the starting deck that you're going to shuffle up and seed the board. And these things are interesting because there are these remote control attack cards, which allows the player to activate a sentry, and these sentries have big, massive attacks that can either go, some of them go diagonal, some of them go in line, some of them blow up a really big area around them, and you don't want to get in the crosshairs of those. And so you have to be mindful of how close you are to sentries and which sentries you are. And then there's other things like the rubble, where it's just like, it's blocking the way. Or there's like the 4D printers, which are actually they get you things if you're by them and on them. It gets you actually equipment. You're just like printing your own equipment in battle, I guess, or something like that. It's really quite neat, kooky, and crazy. What else can I say about Gadget Grid? I really enjoy that there is tons of variability in this style of game, which is kind of what you need. Because games, for me at least, have not been lasting a really long time. We've had 2-player games that last like 15 minutes. I've played some 4-player games where it's only lasted half an hour, just a little bit more than half an hour-ish. So you definitely want that variability in there, which this game does have, so that you can, play quite a few games. The setup is a little annoying because you do have to, every single game you have to get your starting set of cards, and then you have to roll the dice 11 times in order to seed the board. But other than that, you're just rolling after that one. It's almost like the setup takes as long as the gameplay, but I'm just maybe over exaggerating at that point. Okay, so Gadget Grid, currently on Kickstarter. Check it out if this seems like a style of game that you would be interested in, especially if you got some of those young gamers. Like I say, like this would be a great game, kind of like I think back to my childhood of those Parker Brothers and Milton Bradley style games. Like I'm thinking about that Ninja Turtle game right now. This has got that exact same feeling for me. It's got lots of that nostalgia feeling, that this would be a great game. Pick it up for your kids, pick it up for your nephews, nieces, anybody who's in kind of like that likes this kind of like, science fiction-y style, combat, beat 'em up style game. This is going to hit with a lot of different types of families, a lot of different types of gamers. Definitely check out the Kickstarter campaign if you are at all intrigued with this one. I definitely will be. I want to follow them and see how they're doing. Thank you to Space Mole Games for providing me with this copy to provide this content for you. On that note, I am going to remind everybody that if you are enjoying the content that I am creating for this channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell for when new videos are dropping and popping around, and hit that like button and comment on this video. Are you going to be checking out Space Mole Games Gadget Grid, currently on Kickstarter? Let me know what you think about it, and whether or not you will be backing or not backing. I want to hear either way. All right, folks, I've been Ryan of Mr. House Gaming Rants and Reviews, and I'm going to close out this review saying that this review is officially over.